Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about my 2002 Trans Am that you see here behind me. If you caught some of my other videos, I have done a few cosmetic things to this car, including replacing the top, which was a ginormous pain, but it did need to be done to make the car look better. But other than that, other than lowering the car, I haven't done a whole lot of stuff to the vehicle. I did take it to the track when it was 100% stock, and I'll post that in a link up above here so you can see kind of what it did stock. But now we're going to do a couple performance modifications to it. I have already done a few things. That includes I did put some BMR subframe connectors on it, some BMR relocation brackets, which is really needed when you do a lowering kit or lower a vehicle to keep you from wheel hopping. I also did an SLP lid, a ported throttle body, which I ported myself, and that's about it. I haven't taken it back to the track since then because I want to do these modifications next, and then we're going to take it to the track and see what all these combined things do. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out in this video showing you how to install underdrive pulley. So this is what that's going to look like. The first thing we want to do is unhook the battery. It's just an 8mm. Go ahead and unhook the negative side of the battery, making sure that it's not touching anywhere.
We're going to move on to the starter. Now the starter has two 13mm bolts, one on each side. Once you get it out of the way, and before you take the starter loose, make sure that you unhook the battery. You don't want to accidentally arc across the wires to a ground. So make sure your battery's unhooked. Take the two 13mm out. It will pull straight out, and then we'll be able to get to the two bolts on the top side of it. So the wire that comes from the battery and then the trigger wire from the ignition. Once you've got the starter out, so the two 13mm bolts, you do have to unhook the trigger wire, which is an 8mm, and the power wire that goes to the alternator, and that is a 13mm. So take those both loose, get those out of the way, and then the starter will be completely out of your way.
Once the starter's out of the way, we're going to put this tool in to hold the flywheel in place while we undo the bolt in the front of the balancer. And I'll list this in the description down below where you can get it, a link to where you can get it. I wanted to give you guys a look of that tool when it's put into place. You can see it's locked into the flywheel. Try to get a little more light up here. But locks into the bottom side of the flywheel, bolts into the stock starter location, does come with bolts. So now we're ready to get the bolt out of the crank. You can see up here that I have a breaker bar and then an extension in order to get enough leverage to get this bolt loose. So it is a 24mm, and you're going to need that much leverage in order to get it loose. Once you get it loose, it comes out pretty easy with a ratchet. So after getting the bolt loose down on the bottom, you're going to take the belts off. So there's two belts. There's one on the front side for the drive components, and there's one on the back side for the compressor. You're going to need a 15mm wrench. All you need to do is swing this out of the way, and then you're going to get the belts off. You just push it off the water pump, the bottom side of the water pump, and then the same thing down below. This is the bottom one. Your tensioner is right here, so same 15mm. You're going to loosen that, slide that belt off, and then we'll be ready to start taking the actual pulley off. This is the puller that we're going to be using. It's actually for a Chrysler harmonic balancer, but it actually works really well on an LS stock style balancer. I'll list this in the description down below if you want to purchase one of these. It's not a bad item to have. If you don't want to buy one, you can go to your local parts store, and generally they have this for rent. You can rent it, use it, and then take it back when you're finished. So basically what you do here is you hook these jaws on the three sections of the balancer itself, and you run the bolt down through the center to push the actual crank pulley off. And I'll show you once I get it set up in there what it looks like. When you get this kit, it comes with what looks like a push rod. Well, the problem with that is it's not long enough to reach and start to pull this off. So what I use is a 1/4-inch extension that's longer than it. It slides right in the end of the bolt, and then we put it up into place, and I'll show you what I'm talking about.
here it is in place, ready to start cranking on the end bolt. But you can see, I don't know if you can see or not, but you can barely see the extension that I used on the inside, just like I showed you. And now we're going to start to crank this, and it's going to push the balancer off. So as you're tightening this center, you need to look on the back side here, and you can see that it's pulling out. And you can tell because it's shiny where it was setting inside of the front cover. So make sure that it is pulling. It is kind of tough to get off, so it takes a little bit of time. I would love to be able to get my impact in here, but I just can't do it without getting the fans out of the way. So we're going to keep cranking this until it comes off. Sometimes you have to reposition. If you bottom out, you have to reposition, start over, but we're going to get this old one off, and then we'll talk about putting the new one on. Now that the old one's off, you can see the difference in size between the old one and the new one. Now, I did buy this one used, but I will link below some different options you have if you want to buy one new. I just got a pretty good deal on this one used, so that's what I'm putting on. It is an SLP. So our next step is to put the new one on, obviously. So I've went ahead, and you can see that I put some petroleum jelly on the inside and the outside. That just helps it slide on a little easier. Some people like to put them in the oven for a little bit to heat them up, but I generally don't have any issue pressing the new one on. But to put the new one on, you do need a tool. Do not use the old bolt. A lot of people say that you can just use the old bolt to pull it on. Well, the problem with that is it could pull the threads out. So I'll link in the description down below where you can get this tool, and what it does is it allows it to pull on as opposed to using the threads to pull it on. So you can actually strip the threads out of the crank by using the old bolt to put it on. So do not do that. Just get it up there. You can tap it with your hand to get it started, and then you'll thread this tool in the center, and what it does is it has a bearing in it, and this pulls that on. So we're going to bottom this out, and I'll show you when the tool's up in there kind of what the next step is. Now that I've threaded the tool completely inside, it's as far as it'll go. I started the pulley on just by hand. It set on the end of the crank. We're going to start to turn this inside piece while we hold the outside piece. Now, what this will do, like I said, is pull the pulley on. And you want to make sure that it's getting started even, so occasionally look on the back side, making sure that the top's not going in and the bottom's not. So make sure that it's going in nice and even, but you shouldn't have any issue. We're going to tighten this all the way down where all the pulleys are then lined up. If you have an alignment issue, it may not be in all the way. So that's the next step. Once you have that all the way pressed on, it's time to put the new bolt in. So the way that's going to work is we are going to use a new bolt. Make sure that you're using a new bolt unless you have an ARP bolt, and I'll list this product down below as well. It's just a brand new GM bolt. It's one-time use. So we're going to put that bolt in, and we're going to torque it to 240 foot-pounds. Now the reason you do that is it's making sure that it's seated all the way, and then you back it off. You do 37 foot-pounds, and then you go 140 degrees past 37 foot-pounds. And so what we're going to do is, and I'll show you also, but we're going to go ahead and put that in, torque it down, back it out, put it to the 37, and then we're going to draw a line on it so we know how far 140 degrees is past, because it's really hard if you don't have a torque wrench that measures that to get that to the proper degree. So I'm going to put the bolt in, like I said, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how I'm going to do the next step. We now have it torqued to 37 foot-pounds. I did the 240, then backed it off, and then put it to 37. And as you can see, I drew a line at the very top in the middle. And what that's going to allow me to do is see how far I need to go to get to 140 degrees. So obviously straight down would be 180. So it's going to be really hard to get this, but what we're going to do is just work on it a little bit at a time, and you can measure where you're at based on the line. So kind of understand now where we need to put it. Not quite all the way to the bottom, and like I said, this is going to be the toughest part. You will need that same breakover bar just like you did to break it loose, but that's the next step, and then we'll go to the belts.
We got the belts that we need here, and I'll list those in the description down below too. The part numbers and a link where you can get them. I'm going to go ahead. You want to put the air conditioner belt on first, and the actual drive one last. This one would be in the way, or sorry, this other one would be in the way if you put this on first. So the hardest part, like I said, was putting that bolt in. I did get it torqued down. It is, like I said, one of the hardest parts. But after you do that, the belts go on, and then you can take your stop out of the flywheel that we used to hold the flywheel in place while we were doing all this, and we can put the starter back in. And make sure that you're hooking up your positive wire and your trigger wire for the starter, and make very sure that you put it, if you notice this one has a pin on it, make sure it's in the same spot that it was, because if these are touching, as soon as you hook up the battery, it's going to try to start. So make sure that they're not touching and they're hooked back up the way they go. Once the starter's in place, torque the two starter bolts, 13mm bolts, torque them to 37 foot-pounds apiece. Okay, so as you can see, that's not a super hard thing to put on. The hardest part is really torquing down that bolt once you get it in, getting the right torque specs on it. That's really the biggest pain out of doing this. But anyway, if you like this video, guys, please give it a thumbs up. Like I said, we're going to be doing several modifications to this car, so if you haven't subscribed, please consider doing that, and then hit that little bell icon so you know every time I release a new video down in the corner. And stay tuned to see what happens next.